Hello, everyone. So, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. I think we have something like a bit less than an hour, so we have a bit more time to talk and discuss. So if you have questions or so, don't hesitate to interrupt. My talk is very flexible, so I can adapt. The inception of this talk is that recently a few people have asked again or told us that it's difficult to install OCA addons, and the main reason for that is that we have a big community, more than 200 repos, and that add-ons depends on each other. So when you are lucky, it's a simple add-on in one repo, and that's easy. But sometimes you need to have 3, 4, 5 repos to just get one add-on working. And also, add-ons have sometimes external dependencies, additional Python libraries you need to install to make them work correctly. And that's also a challenge to find them, find the right one, and so on and so on. So that question came up again. And basically, it's a problem that was more or less solved 8 or 9 years ago when we started publishing all the add-ons to PyPI, which is the Python libraries store. But still, people are sometimes confused because Odoo does not document that way of working or does not explain it. And sometimes people ask also how they can use that in their own environment. And so in the last 10 years, the Python packaging ecosystem has evolved tremendously with several new standards that appeared. And also new tools that use those standards and that make that approach easier than ever, and actually much more easier than 10 years ago. So in this talk, I'm going to explain how you can install the add-ons for evaluation. When you have tried the add-on on Runboat, you are satisfied, you want to go further, install it on your own server. Then for development, or you can integrate your add-ons in your development environment, contribute pull requests and change or bug fix all new add-ons, and also show how that mechanism is also fully fit for production. And one thing I always strive to achieve is to have as little magic sauce as possible, to have as little company-specific mechanisms, so to keep as generic and as simple, using, if possible, off-the-shelf tools that you can use. And so I will have 2 parts, and recently I've done some research on newer tools. The first one is a standard that is called devcontainers, and I explain what it is. And I will show how you can install OCA add-ons on the standard Odoo Docker image and actually develop into it using devcontainers and show really how easy it is actually. And the second part is when you want to go further, I will explain how you can use the really newest shiny Python packaging tool, which is called UV, which is basically a replacement for pip and many other tools. And I'll show you how that works. So the first part, we are looking at how, when using the official Odoo Docker image, how you can install OCA add-ons in it, how you can add custom code in that image, how you can develop and debug using VS Code and a dev container, and then explain how, with that same mechanism, you can add an unmerged pull request, for instance, in your environment, or develop your own. So the prerequisites for that, unfortunately, you probably cannot try it here because the quality of the internet connection, downloading the image will probably not work. But you can try this at home with a web browser, Docker Compose, and VS Code or an IDE that supports devcontainers. I'm told that the JetBrains IDE supports it. I've not tried myself, but it's a standard that actually pushed by Microsoft, but being implemented in more and more tools these days. And so the first step is to create a Docker file where you start from the official Odoo image, very simple. You switch to the root user because the official Odoo image runs under the Odoo user by default. And if you install packages under that users, it goes actually not in the image, but in a volume that is mounted on the image. And that's not ideal for deploying to production. Then I install Git because we'll need it later to install from a pull request. And then here, it's just a pip install of a file, requirements.in, which basically, in my demo, is just containing one add-on. And the principle, at least since version 15, is that once you have the OCA add-on name, you prefix it with odoo-addon-, and that gives you the link, the name of the package on PyPI. One important thing, let me check. Yeah, there are many versions. I will do it like this. One important thing is that you need to check the author of the maintainer of the module on PyPI, because anyone can publish add-ons on PyPI, or anyone can publish any library on PyPI, basically. So as usual, when you install a dependency on your project, you need to be careful. You are downloading code from the internet, so look at what you are getting. So first, be sure that the module is from OCA, and then, of course, do your research, check if the module is what you want, and so on and so on. So that's basically it. One little thing here is that we use a mount to basically mount the requirements.in file from your project into the image for the build. And we also mount the pip cache, which in your development workflow will make it much faster when you need to rebuild the image, because then you have a pip cache that is just available on each rebuild. And then we come back to the Odoo user. And so you have a very simple image based on the Odoo standard that has the MissBuilder add-on added. And that's basically all you have to do. And then, by the way, at the end of the presentation, there is link to a repository where you have all this code and example. So basically, we use the Docker Compose file from, which is the recommended one from the Odoo or Docker image documentation. It's nothing else. And when you do a Docker Compose up to boot your instance, the interesting things to note is that you have this add-ons path that is that Odoo is using, and there are 4 parts in it, and it's important to understand where those come from. The first part is this package /odoo/addon, and basically that is the add-ons from Odoo itself. So when Odoo is installed in the image, all the official add-ons are put there. And then the second part is user local lib python this package Odoo/addons. That is the part that came from the pip install that was run as root. So it goes there in user local lib. Because the root user in the image is configured to install there. And then there is .varlib Odoo addons. That's the one from the data dir. When you run an Odoo instance, it's always add an addons directory in the data directory. You put something there or not, up to you. And then there is this extra addons directory. That comes from the odoo.conf file in the base Odoo image. And so that's how it works. Basically, when Odoo starts, when he finds an Odoo/addons directory in the Python path, he's going to consider there are add-ons there and make them available. So pretty simple, nothing exotic here. And then the interesting thing is that you can actually develop with that image without any change. So you don't need to install development tools in it. You can really develop with that one. And that's done using a standard which is called devcontainer. It's been initiated by Microsoft, but there are more and more vendors gathering around it. And basically it explains, it's basically configuration files which explain how you can bootstrap a development environment in an existing Docker file or Docker Compose configuration. And it works with various IDEs. It has mechanisms to run in CI. It also works on the cloud. So if you go on GitHub, maybe you have seen there is this code space thing in GitHub. When you have a dev container configuration in your project, you can actually open it in the cloud and start developing in the cloud without installing anything locally, nothing else than a browser. And actually, when you, in VS Code, there is a wizard when you can say add a dev container configuration. We have several options, but one option is to start from the existing Docker Compose you have in your project. And with very few tweaks, you can use that exact Docker image. And I will show how it looks like. So basically, when you run that wizard, you get two new files in a dev container directory, which is a devcontainer.json, which is the standard, actually, which say how your development environment is assembled. And basically, you have a stack of two Docker Compose, your original one from your project, and then a new one that enrich your original Docker Compose with some stuff necessary for the development mode. Then you say which service or which container you are going to develop in. In the default Docker Compose is called web. That's where the Odoo instance is running. The other one is Postgres. Then you say where is your code and where it should be mounted in the image, or where it will be mounted in the container. So in that case, it will be in the /workspace directory. And then the rest, you just leave the default. And in that case, since I'm using VS Code, you have the option to add tool-specific extension. And so here, I'm just saying that in that container, I want to have the VS Code Python extension. And the other one was also generated for you. It's this Docker Compose overlay. And basically, by default, the only thing it changes is that it adds a command which is sleep infinity to make sure that your container is going to start and wait and not stop or start the default service. And in this case, we need to tweak it a little bit. We need to set environment variable that are otherwise set by the entry point, so he knows where the DB is. We need to set a shell, because by default, the Odoo user in the Docker image, it has the no login shell, so you can cannot start a terminal on that user. And we're also using a specific volume. Here it's because there are user ID considerations. Actually, when you start a dev container, it's changing the user ID of the main user of the container. So it matches the user ID on your of your local user on your machine. So when you edit files, they get the correct permissions on your file system. And if you start the default container, you get the Odoo user, which has actually a system user ID that cannot be compatible with your user. So you need a specific volume to store the file store and the session. And that's basically it. I didn't need to change the Odoo image, so nothing else, no development tools to install in the base image. It's just this little dev container configuration. And so I'm doing some cleanup, and then when you have that configuration, actually when you open a project in VS Code, you're going to get a pop-up, hey, there is a dev container configuration here, do you want to open it? And basically, what you can do is build and reopen the workspace in a container. Oh, did I click on it? Yes. And so basically, I clean up all my Docker environment. And so you see is starting, it has actually built, yes?
Yes, I've got a question. It is a plugin that we can install on VS Code, right?
Yes, devcontainer is a plugin for Microsoft that you can install. It's in the
devcontainers and I should find it.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Or it's called remote development, maybe. I don't know. Or dev container, but it's easy to find. I'll keep note to add the link in my presentation. So basically, what it has done there, it has built the image. It went fast because it's in cache here, you see my terminal here. I'm in my workspace, and I can actually start. Odoo. And I can also start the debugger. And actually now I'm going to check out. The next stage of my presentation, and in this level I'm just adding a custom add-on. And the custom add-on, actually it's easy to add your add-ons in a Odoo/addons directory, because when you do that, Odoo is going to discover your custom add-ons automatically, and you don't need to fiddle with the add-ons path. Notice that at this stage I've not touched the Odoo configuration. It's just the default one that comes from the Docker image. And in that Docker, in my add-on, I've just added a print statement just so I can put a breakpoint here. And I have, for those who know VS Code, I have a debug configuration, which is also pretty simple. It just say I want to start the Odoo module. That's something that you can do since version 17 only, because there is a main file in Odoo, so it can run the module as the main module. For previous versions, you need to start it as a program and but that's no very easy. And so I can start. So I'm still running in the container, okay. And so I can start actually debugging. So I didn't hit my breakpoint because it's not installed, so let's try to install it. So Odoo is there. Going to create a new user. And you see my custom add-on is visible here. And if I install it, everything goes well. I'm hitting my breakpoint. I can introspect and everything. So as you see, in 2024, you don't need much exotic infrastructure or custom magic sauce to develop with Odoo. All you need on your machine is Docker, VS Code in this case, and off you go. Let me check. What else do I have? The other thing that I wanted to show is how you can add an unmerged pull request. And in that case, it's also pretty easy. I can show it here, for instance. Okay. But I have that on the slide, so that's going to be easier. So to add an unmerged pull request, that's the syntax. And this is standard pip syntax, actually. So you start with the module name. Even that is optional, actually. Then you give the Git reference. So you give the name, the URL of the repository. And then you give, there is this Git syntax to reference a pull request, the ref pull, the pull request number, and then the subdirectory where your add-on is located in that pull request. That is necessary because in OCA add-ons, we have many add-ons in any repo, and since version 17, actually each add-on is a little Python project. If you look into them, there is a pyproject.toml inside each Odoo add-on, which means that each add-on is a little Python project that you can just install with pip. And for previous version, the subdirectory is setup / the add-on name, but the principle is just the same. And so when you develop, actually, when I will stop my debugger, and then I can just rebuild the container when I've changed something. And when you do that, it's going to restart your container and then re-inject your development environment. And in that case, you are seeing in the log that it's actually rebuilding the other image because something has changed in the source. And so is pulling, is doing the checkout and installing from Git. It's a bit slow because I'm on my phone here, but it should work. All right. And then next, I wanted to mention something that is important, because if you do it this way with this requirements.in with just the add-on names, you just basically get the latest version of the add-on every time you build your container. And that's not ideal. For production, you want to be sure that you deploy always the same version as you developed. And for that, it's important to pin the dependencies. So here you see it was installed, and to pin the dependencies, you have this pip freeze command, where you just need to give it the path. So if you remember at the beginning, I was mentioning this directory user local bin, this package, which are the add-ons we installed in the image. And so we want to pin only the thing we have added ourselves to the image, because the image it probably has a tag, so you can use that. And then you pin that in a requirements.txt file. And this file looks like this. It looks like this. So basically, it's very similar. The difference is that you get the exact version that was installed, but you also get all the dependencies. So if you remember, we just installed MISBuilder and MISBuilder budget, but actually MISBuilder depends on the date range module, which is in another repo, and the report XLSX, which is in yet another repo. And so you get the version of all the dependencies that you installed. And that's really something that I strongly recommend to do in all your production environments, to be sure that when you do a bug fix, you are going to redeploy the same thing, and that you can control your upgrade process. Okay. Yes?
So the requirement that you create from the freeze,
Yes?
where do you store it? In your container or in your...
You store it in your Git repo. So in your project, in your Git repo, and then you update your Docker file to install from it. Always do that. But then if you want to refresh all dependencies, you can just start with a fresh image, reinstall the requirements.in, and that you will get the latest version of everything. Okay. But indeed, that's the point where it starts to become a little bit tricky when you have many. Well, when you have few dependencies, that's okay. But when you start to have many dependencies, it becomes more difficult to maintain manually. And also, for instance, you need to be sure that the dependencies you have in your requirement.in match what you need in your custom add-ons. So you have the same information in two places. And in the second part, I will show a solution for that. So, as you see, very little magic sauce, just off-the-shelf tools, nothing special. To me, it's really the simplest you can get to start developing with Odoo and OCA add-ons. I'm not sure we'll have the time to show how you develop your own add-on to publish to OCA, but we'll see. If you have time, I'll show it. Otherwise, we can discuss later. At some point, you will get limitations. So, as I said, managing dependencies manually can become a bit complex when you have many of them. Or if you want to develop without Docker, personally, I like Docker for deployment, but for local development, personally, I don't like it because it's heavy, but it's a personal opinion. Or maybe the official Odoo image does not suit your need for whatever reason. Or in the rare case, you need to patch Odoo. Also, it's a bit more difficult with the official Odoo image. And so, don't know if there are questions on this part at this stage. Yes?
Sorry, I think there is, when we are developing with Odoo, there is an argument for the run command.
Yes.
Called dev, that
Yes? I believe so, yes. I think you just need to install the watch Python package called watch that you need to install. But then it's fully compatible with that, yes. I think so. I've not tried, honestly, but it should. Yeah?
I've got a question about the main file for Odoo.
Yes?
What package does it run with? Is it maybe UV core or something? Is it Flask? Is it a custom?
Odoo, the question is what is the web server Odoo is running, yes? Odoo is using Werkzeug as which is a WSGI implementation. Yeah. Odoo is essentially a WSGI application. Yes. Yes. And the previous question was developing with the --dev option of Odoo. I believe it's compatible, but we can try it just after. Yeah. Yes?
When you say you need show to image, does it work with the OCB sources of Odoo?
Sorry, can you?
Yeah, because you say it needs official Odoo image to work. Does it also work with the sources from OCB or not?
Actually, I don't think we build an OCB Docker image. That does not exist. So that's the reason. But in the next step, I show how to use OCB in a way that's also very, very easy. Okay. Otherwise, you can also rebuild your own base image by copying the official Odoo Docker file and starting from there, of course. That should work too. Okay. So now a totally different approach, but it is also very easy, but that is very new, using a tool that is called UV, and I'm going to explain how it is. And the path here is that I will start the very minimal Odoo project with manual management of dependencies, and then show progressively how you can automate the management of dependencies and also add unmerged pull requests and so on, and also develop in a dev container. So what is UV? UV is actually a very new tool. The people who started working on that started just 1 year ago, and they went public, I think, in February or March this year. And it's a tool that is actually meant to replace basically any other Python project management tool in existence, all of them. So it's going to their goal is to replace pip tools it's a tool to freeze dependencies, pipex, poetry, tool to install Python for you. It's going to replace virtualenv and so on and so on. The thing is that this thing is really fast. Those guys are crazy because they used the thing is written in Rust, but most importantly is because they are using very advanced and aggressive caching techniques that makes it very, very fast, more than the fact that it's written in Rust. So the tool is capable of installing Python for you, so you can start on a fresh Linux machine with nothing else. You install UV, and it's going to download and install the right Python version for your project. It can run and install a Python application. That's what I will show. It has a log file mechanism. So before I showed the requirements.txt file, which is a simple log file. Here it has a more advanced log file with hashes for better checks and reproducibility. And it's also a universal log file, because when you do a pip freeze, you get the dependencies on your local machine and for your operating system, current Python version, and so on. They have a universal log file that is going to create a log file that is compatible with all platforms. So if one platform needs one version of a package and the other one another version, it will take care of that and lock everything at once. It has a pip-compatible interface, so it's easy. You can type UV pip, and it works more or less like pip, but for the most common commands, it's really just like pip. And very important, it has a global cache, which is really efficient because in the cache, it unpacks the wheels it has downloaded. And when it installs them in a virtual environment, it's doing hard links to those wheels. So it's very space efficient if you reuse the same wheels all the time in different environments. It's not copying them, it's doing hard links to the cache. That makes it fast and disk efficient. And also it has a Git cache. So when you install stuff from Git, it's also caching the Git checkouts in its cache. So it basically for those who use Git AutoShare to manage their or similar Git work trees or stuff like that, you don't need to worry about that anymore because UV is going to do the Git caching and sharing for you. It's easy to install, it's a single executable. And it's also compatible, so if you create a virtual environment with UV, you can use it with pip and other tools. It's compatible because it's based on packaging interoperability standards. And actually, to install Odoo, all you need is to create a pyproject.toml, which is the modern way, let's say, to define a Python project. So the minimal thing you need to give is a name and a version. And that's a Python project. And then I'm going to say here that my project needs to run on Python 3.12. And in the dependencies, I'm saying I want Odoo version 17. And then I add a few additional constraints that really should be in the setup.py of Odoo itself. And I'll try to talk to people at R&D for that. But otherwise, the important part is that you add Odoo. And since Odoo is not on PyPI, you need to tell it where to get it from. And that's a section that's specific to UV. I'm going to say that Odoo is coming from Git, from this repo and this branch. And here I'm using OCB. And the reason I'm using OCB is that for this to work, we need a pull request that is open at Odoo since, I think, 5 years, that modernize their setup mechanism, because it's actually not compatible with the latest standard. I've good hope to, I've seen things moving, so I've good hope to get that merged maybe one day. But in the meantime, we have merged it in OCB. I port it to other branches, so that's it. And for that, I can do a little demo. I'm going to remove and remove this log file. So basically in this project, all I have is this pyproject.toml that I just showed you. And I also have a custom add-on, but it doesn't matter for this little demo. So I remove the virtual environment, and I type UV run Odoo. And if the gods of the demo are with me, probably what's happening here is that since yesterday, there have been a few commits on the 17 branch. So it took a little bit of time to pull the latest commits. And then he done that, he got that commit. And now it's building Odoo. It's packaging the wheel from Odoo. And when that is done, hopefully it will work, but it will. I think it's going something on the internet here because okay. And so I have a few warnings here, but basically it started Odoo. And you will notice that just running Odoo has created this log file. So it's a bit verbose, but you have all the dependencies that are pinned in there. And so if I start again, I can remove the virtual environment. I can run it again. And boom, I'm starting Odoo from cache and the exact same dependencies. So the idea is that uv.log file, you commit it to in your project, in your Git repo, and you can share it with your colleague. You have the guarantee that your colleague will run the exact same version as you. And if you want to refresh some dependency, need to look at the UV documentation. It's really well done. You have an update package command that will get the latest version. And so we can move up the demo. So another interesting thing is that also here, since where is it? Oh no, it was there. So what did I want to do next? Where is it? Ah. Yes?
You have time, there's no next talk in this room.
Yes. So. So in this level, you've seen that it has installed new packages. And why is that? That's because in my pyproject.toml, I have added MIS Builder in the dependency section. And to do, actually when you do UV run, it's just noticing that the pyproject.toml file has changed. It's looking at the new dependencies and refreshing everything, and also keeping the log file up to date with the new dependencies. And another thing to notice is no, it's not here. Strange. Anyway, all right. Then. So that's the addition, yeah. The Yeah, and by the way, you can debug it exactly the same way. So VS Code is going to notice there is a .vn file directory with the virtual environment. Is going to propose you to use that interpreter, and you can just start the debugger. And yeah.
The argument is run. C'est quoi, c'est UV run Odoo?
Yes. Yes.
In the args for VS Code?
No. In the args for VS Code, in the launch.json, you just tell it to run the Odoo module, because basically what UV run is doing is checking the dependencies are up to date and then running the regular Python in the virtual environment. So it's no different. So for VS Code, it doesn't make a difference that the thing comes for UV or not. It's just a standard virtual environment. Okay. And so the next step I want to show is, because here we still have the little inconvenience that the dependencies, you manage them manually. So you add them to the dependencies. So you need to keep them in sync with your custom code, with the depends on your in your manifest. And the next thing you can do is using a plugin for the Hatchling build backend. Hatchling is an alternative to set up tools to package, to build Python project. And Odoo is a plugin for that backend that's going to automatically detect dependencies by looking in the manifests of the add-ons. And so here, the PyProject.toml is a little bit more sophisticated. So you first need to declare your build system. So you're saying, I'm going to use Hatchling with the Odoo plugin. The other thing you need, because I told you that UV is caching very aggressively, the other thing to need is to say what files UV needs to look at to know when new dependencies can appear. And here we tell it that it must look in PyProject.toml, but also look at the manifests in the Odoo add-ons. And then there is a bit boilerplate to tell Hatch what to package. You tell the plugin, you basically activate the plugin to say, look at the dependencies in the add-ons manifest. And you tell the plugin where your add-ons are, and then you can also add regular dependencies here. The rest does not change, except that you have, this one is important, you have this dynamic equal dependencies. So you are telling basically UV and other tools that the dependencies, you cannot find them in the PyProject.toml. They are computed dynamically by the build backend. Okay? So we need to run some tool to know, and basically it's going to run Odoo through a standardized interface to look at all the dependencies, the external dependencies that are in your add-ons. And so in this case, in my add-on, I put MissBuilder in the depends. I have removed MissBuilder from the dependencies here. And if I UV sync, which is another command to refresh the virtual environment, basically it has reinstalled the project, but does not change anything. But if I go in my manifest and I say, I want this instead, and I can do no UV run or UV sync, whatever. Here is detecting that a new dependency is here and installing it for you. But if you forget to sync, just run is going to resync for you, and you just don't need to think about installing stuff in your environment. So I've shown that. To add an external dependency, so to add an external dependency, you just use external dependencies in your manifest as you're used to. And also, Odoo is going to detect them. So you sync, and you see it has installed Pydantic that I just added in the external dependency. And the dependencies of Pydantic, of course. And the log file is updated. And by the way, the log file, they are designing it to, well, you don't see the diff here because it was already in Git. But the log file looks complex, but it's designed in such a way that you can analyze the diff on the log file. So they make so to sort things, to make things the content is stable across runs. So you can run diff and you can audit what is added in your log file when you do a change. And to add an unmerged pull request, the syntax is going to be this. So remember, we had this requirement.txt syntax at the beginning with the git blah, blah, blah. In this case, we are telling you, you will put that in tool UV sources to say that Miss Builder budget, you don't get it from PyPI. You get it from this git source. So you give the git repo, the same syntax for the revision, for the pull request, and the subdirectory where the project is. Sorry? No, indeed. The question is this for a single pull request? Yes, so it will give you the exact code of that pull request. So if your pull request is out of date, you don't get the latest code of the add-on. And if you need two pull requests on the same add-on, then you need to aggregate and create the branch yourself. But it happens, but honestly, in many cases, it's relatively, well, it's been the exception that you need several pull requests on the same add-ons. And very important, this is per add-on. So you can have different pull requests in the same repo. That's very important. You don't need to have the same commit because two add-ons, you want different version of the same add-on, whatever. This is really per add-on, not per repo. So that's also very, very flexible. But indeed, if you need several pull requests on the same add-on, then you need to manage that yourself with Git aggregate typically to push that on a branch of yours and so on. So level 7, I wanted to show you. So that's, I add the Git reference here, and I can also UV sync. And this one was very fast. You see it uninstalled that version and installed that new version from the pull request from Daniel that I need to merge, by the way. And it was very fast because I had done it yesterday, so it was in cache already, so it was super fast, but otherwise he would have done the Git pull. But since it has that Git cache, if you have different pull requests on the same repo, it will get the repo only once and then get the different commits, but it will not pull the whole repo with each pull request you add. So it's really comfortable to use and really efficient. And then, do I still have 5 minutes or maybe? Not too hungry? Yeah, so I just show you how you can do a Docker file for deployment, but also if you want to use, well, to me, when you have that, there is little reason to develop in Docker, because basically the only dependency the only thing you need to install on your machine is what you need to build PsychoPG2, because that one does not have a wheel on PyPI, and so that one will going to be built from source. So you need to install the C compiler and the Postgres dev library to build that. But that's all you need to develop. Depends on your use case, of course. If you have many exotic dependencies, then it can make sense to go in Docker. But yeah, it's up to you. But it's really fast and comfortable to develop this way, in my opinion. So I'm going to show you a Docker file. It is heavily inspired. In the UV documentation, they have recommendation on how to use UV in a Docker file. So I will really encourage you to look at that. And so we can look at that Docker file. So here I'm using, as a basis, I'm using the Odoo bedrock image that we use at Axon. It's an image that is, there is not, Odoo is not in it actually. It's a base image where you have the mechanics to configure it using environment variable. It's using actually the same environment variable that the camp-to-camp image. So it's compatible for configuration. So when starting, it generates the Odoo configuration from the environment variables. And the other thing it does is that it has a WK HTML to PDF client in it. And otherwise, it has Python pre-installed. And basically, that's it. So in this image, I'm preparing it by installing a Postgres client. And then I install UV. I copy it from the official UV Docker image. I set a few environment variables to follow the recommendation of UV, basically to work inside a Docker file correctly. You can read the documentation if you're interested in what that does. And then that's the base stage. It's a multi-stage Docker file. So that's the base one. And the second one is the dependency stage that builds on the base stage. And in this stage, I install everything that is necessary to build the project. So I already had UV, but here I need Git because I'm going to install pull request. I need this Postgres library I was talking about and the build essential to compile it. If you need additional build dependencies, you add them there. And then the command we run here is UV sync with two options. Frozen, which say I'm going to create, to install my virtual environment from the log file, but without resolving the dependencies. We just use what is frozen in the log file. Okay? And the other thing is that we don't install the project, because in this stage we want only the dependencies. And why are we doing that? It's because, and you see, we don't copy the project in that layer. We just copy the UV lock and the pyproject.toml. And the reason we do that, because when we have run that, we have populated the virtual environment with all the dependencies and nothing else. And another thing is that we mount the UV cache. So rebuilding the image is going to be fast too. And then the runtime layer is the one that's going to go in production. It's not based on dependencies. It's based on the base layer, the very first one. But we start by copying from the dependencies layer the whole virtual environment that we have set up in the dependency stage. And the reason we do that is that by doing that, you don't have the build tools in the runtime. So it's as small as possible. Okay. And the other reason to have two stages is that the dependency stage, you can use it in CI. You can build your image up to the dependency stage and use that in CI, because in CI you don't copy your app in the image, but you have all the dependencies, so you can run your tests in CI. And then the runtime is as slim as you can. So we copy the dependencies and we install the app. So we copy the app. We compile all the Python code. And then we finish by a last UV sync. And we use here the locked argument, which is going to check. This one is doing a resolve, but it's checking that nothing would change in the log file. So if the dependencies are not up, if the log file is not up to date, you will get an error and you fail your build. So that way you are sure that when you deploy, you have not forgotten to lock any dependency. And that's it. And I'm not going to show you because you are angry, but you can do a dev container on top of that one, very similar to the one I showed in the first part. It works too. So if you want to work in a dev container, that works, and your dev container would work in the dependencies image, because that one is going to mount the project on the dependencies image, and you can develop in that part. And so I think this is it. Basically, you have all the links here. I've put a repo which actually look like this. There is a branch for each step, so you can explore and see what's added in each layer and study it and see how it's built, and the documentation and so on. So in my opinion, that's really the future for Python development, and I just thought it's really applicable to Odoo without anything exotic. And I'm open to questions. Yes? Sorry? UV actually is backed by a startup, venture capital backed. So that's of course raising questions because it's not really a community-owned project. I think there is a kind of consensus in the Python community that it is nevertheless a good thing for the Python ecosystem, because the quality of what they've built is really great. It's MIT license or Apache or both, I don't know. So it's really, there are no strings attached. It's really, so in case that company bankrupts or disappears or whatever, the consensus from what I read in the community is that the Python community would still be better than before because of that tools. The other thing is that it's creating some frustration in the Python community because many Python tool developers just got out of business. I'm a pip maintainer. To be honest, since that's there, the level of activity on pip and of course the motivation to continue pushing things has got lower, of course. But those folks are very reactive. Pip will continue to exist, of course, because that's pure Python, and that's also very important. Yeah, so we'll see. It's still very new, but already at a very good stage. I mean, this demo would not have been feasible like 3 months ago, so there are new feature. But now everything is there. So, yeah. Of course, up to you to decide, but I personally think it's a good tool. Yeah.
Because UV has a library like Python.
There's no need to because it's just using PyPI. It's based on really on standards. So, for instance, the wheel standard, the package you find on PyPI are mostly wheels or source distribution, but the format of those is a standard. The format of a virtual environment is a standard. How you invoke a build what you call a build backend, the way to invoke setup tools or Odoo, for instance, those are standardized too. And how to do, I've not shown it today, but how to do an editable install, for instance, since a few years, it's also a standard. And UV is really building on those standards to be fully interoperable with everything. Yes?
Can you give examples about saving space on your hard drive against
no, I've not done that exercise, so I cannot give figures.
How big is a container in one standard project? And what's the difference about saving space?
Compared to what?
Compared to between UV and the first one?
I think in the end, the container, the size will be probably the same. Where you save space is when you do local development, because there you have your pip cache, and if you have different projects with different virtual environment, then you have those hard links to the cache, and then you save space on your local disk. But the container themselves, if you do your container correctly, the size, if you use pip or UV, is the same. Because the result is exactly the same. It's the virtual environment, so there is no difference. Yes?
Does it do something similar to hash checking when you download?
Yes. So in uv.lock, there are hashes for everything. And if it's a wheel or a source distribution, you get the hash of the source archive. And if you have installed from a pull request, is preserving the branch or the ref, but is also putting the commit hash in the log file. So you are sure to keep the same. Yeah.
If someone makes a change under the same version, I do the UV sync lock, I will get an error.
No, you would get an error if you have a download corruption or something like that, because the hash will not be correct. If you install a new version with update.
I'm trying to protect myself against tampering.
About
Someone tampering with the particular version I'm using.
Yes, so if for instance PyPy is compromised, that will be detected, because after downloading we'll check against the hash in the log file, so it will detect it. An important thing is that when you lock a pull request, is that the commits of that pull request may disappear or become unreachable if people rebase or something. So at Axon, we have a tool called pip preserve requirements. When we install a pull request in a project, automatically we push it to a repo we own, and we tag that commit to protect it and to be sure that it's never going to disappear. That's something I don't know yet how to do with UV, but certainly something I will investigate in the coming months.
We have practice deploy code on the project. You need to have a branch
On your own, yeah, that's what we do too. Yeah. And with PyPI, normally you are protected, because once PyPI gives you the guarantee that it will never remove or replace any file. So that's a guarantee that you have from PyPI. Of course, if PyPI gets compromised, but then we have other problems, I guess. But if you are really paranoid, you would need to copy the PyPI package to your own index, which is possible too. Yeah. Yes?
How would you handle a multi-add-on deployment with this?
Just. Actually, it's the same project. All right. I put my add-ons in Odoo/addons there, and I put all my add-ons there. And so that is my customer project. I put all my add-ons there, and the rest come either from PyPI or Git reference, and all is there. And it's detecting the dependencies in my add-ons directory. Thanks to the configuration, which is basically here, we say the add-ons there for Odoo, it's there. You can have several, if you have a very big project, you could have several add-ons directories in your project, or if for some reason you want to have a Git submodule with some add-on, you can have your Git submodule in your repo and just put another add-on there here, and you can, it's going to look into all of them to find the dependencies, and when it builds and install, it's going to copy everything to Odoo add-ons in the side package directory.
For installing Odoo as a dependency, then you don't have a problem because until recently we could only install it with the
Yes, so that's why I use OCB here, because this weekend we have merged in OCB the patch so that their setup.py is compatible. But they are working on it. I've seen Christophe, one of the Christophe there, worked on that pull request a few weeks ago, so hopefully it's moving. It's only 5 years old, so that's okay. We are patient. Okay, any other question? Nope. Okay, thank you very much. Enjoy the lunch.